There we go. All right, so tonight's lecture is about ethics. And you may roll your eyes and go, oh, fine, another lecture about ethics. I started this lecture some time ago because it occurred to Bonnie and I in a conversation with some students that the university at that time was approaching ethics in engineering from 2 points of view. One, a professor would log into whatever the professional society is for your flavor of engineering, would go to the ethics, this society believes in the following ethics, and would go to that page, project it up on the screen, and then would say, I don't know, those seem like good ethics. Maybe you should adopt those. All right, then I've covered ethics in the lecture, and then would close that and go on with things. Another way that professors would deal with ethics is they would start giving you those ethical things, those ethical tests, those. There's a fire on the island and you have a boat, but there's 20 people on the island and only 15 can fit in the boat. Here's who they are. Who goes into the boat? One of those where you're supposed to like kill off for 10 people and explain rationally why you made those decisions. And I've always been like, I don't know, could some of them hang on to the boat and swim? Let's try that. That sounds good. Yes. Yeah, if there's an island, I don't know. I took one of those years and years ago in anthropology, and one of the professors said, "Okay, now we've talked ethics." And then I went and did my field work and thought, "No, that really we didn't cover ethics like at all, really." Turns out I needed that, but yeah. So now the university is offering you entire classes on ethics, which, from my understanding, has you reading things that have happened and then asking what your thoughts are. And all of that's good and well and lovely, and I'm glad they're doing that. It's way better than, putting the ethics of the professional organization up on the screen going, all right, then, we've covered ethics. Off we go to other things. But I have a different view on ethics. And this is hopefully a conversation, and it is a conversation. This is hopefully a conversation that approaches this differently. Now, this is where I give the disclaimer. I'm going to use myself as an example throughout this lecture. Okay? That is not because I think I am a paragon of ethics. Please remember, I've been married 4 times. Through the course of 2 bad marriages, my list of faults has been read to me multiple times. I am perfectly aware that I am a broken, fragile, not perfect human being, like all of you. But I need an example to illustrate some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about. So I asked myself if I would be okay with sharing some personal information about myself as examples here. And I thought it through and decided that, yes, I would be fine with that. So I am going to be sharing examples from my life, from my existence. I also want to let you know, because I just do, that this is at this point in the class, because I've not known any of you very long, this is also a kind of scary lecture for me to give, because I am going to be very self-disclosive, again, with the examples. And I don't know any of you yet, right? You've all just shown up in my life. And being self-disclosive to people that you've just met can be an uncomfortable kind of situation. I'm just letting you know that. I prefer to give this lecture like in week 8, when I've gotten very comfortable with all of you. We've all kind of built some sort of relationship, and we haven't yet. So here we are. And this lecture either goes really well or I walk out going, oh my God, that was a disaster. All right. So what I'm going to cover tonight, I'm going to talk about where you're from. There's 3 parts to this lecture, really. Where you're from, your family of origin. Good, bad, indifferent, but your family of origin. Then I'm going to talk about who you say you are, who you decide you are. And then I'm going to talk about who you show us that you are. So who you decide you are, and then who you show the rest of us being the other people on the planet, who you are. All right, that's what I'm going to cover tonight. 3 parts, 3 simple things. And if you're looking at the slides, you're going, yeah, there's like 4 slides to this lecture. I know, right? All right, so let's start. I'm going to start with where you're from, because if the analogy I use here, the metaphor, if you will, is that your parents created you. That's not a metaphor, they did. Or if you were adopted, they still created you in some form. And then by raising you, they installed the operating system, if you will. Right? They set up for you your sense of humor, the things you're interested in, the way you think about the world, any spiritual or religious systems that you might subscribe to. They taught you what food is, what are things to consider to be edible. Those of you who are first generation, who grew up in a not culturally diverse school, for example, discovered that when you brought your culturally appropriate foods to school for lunch, other people may have looked at you like you were insane. And I'm really, really sorry that happened. And those stupid people now didn't teach their children how to appreciate the good stuff. But I'm also very food adventurous. So, but that sort of thing. And they did all of that because number one, that's a parent's job. That's what we do as parents. Our job is to raise moderately functional, moderately reasonably socially appropriate human beings. And then they sent you to college. They sent you out into the world. And part of your job now as college students is to start to discover who you are. You got the operating system installed, and you could, if you wanted, never be more than the operating system that was installed for you. And that's a perfectly fair, perfectly valid choice to make. Many people do. You've heard people say it was good enough for my dad, it's good enough for me. It was good enough for my grandmother, it's good enough for me. And what they're saying is the operating system that their family installed for them is good enough, it needs no changes, they're going to be fine with it. And they're not necessarily wrong. I have a point of view about that, but for them, that may be the right decision. We can marvel at that decision, we can wonder at that decision, but we don't have the right to tell them they're wrong. We can point out the limitations of that, but we don't get to tell them what's right for them. They get to decide what's right for them. And so long as it doesn't negatively impact us, we have no say in that. Okay? Same with you. You all, though, are in college, and you may have noticed that college is a very different world than where you came from. Now, here's where I start to get personal. So, I'm trying to decide where I want to start here and how much I want to disclose. You could all look at me approvingly. That would help. So, I did not graduate high school. I did not go to high school. I did not graduate high school. I married when I was 16. I, starting at about 14, I started running wild. And by running wild, I mean running wild. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, the whole thing. And my parents, I think, did the best they could, but they were broken, scratchy, imperfect people like all of us. And I think that they were a bit overwhelmed by the child I was at 14, 15, and 16. I think everybody would have been overwhelmed with that person that I was being. So when this 22-year-old man showed up and was my boyfriend, and then he said he wanted to marry me, my parents, I think, privately went, "Oh, thank God, somebody take her off our hands. Jesus God. Okay, get married. Off you go." So I got married at 16, got pregnant almost immediately afterwards, and then had my son just after I turned 17. So if you ever wonder, how does she have adult children, adult grandchildren, almost adult grandchildren for one of them, and the other one is now 18. She'll be 19 next month. Oh my God. It's because I started at 17. When you start really, really early, I could have been a grandmother at 34. Thank God I wasn't, but I could have been, which is terrifying to think about. So set that all up. So I think from what I just told you, you can abstract out that there weren't a lot of expectations for me. My folks didn't have a lot of expectations is the only word I can think of because I was running wild. Well, I wasn't running wild in a vacuum. I was just, but that's neither here nor there. But the point is, the expectations for me at 16 were low, very low, very, 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 very low. But my parents did instill some good values in me and instilled a significant work ethic, which are two things that I have really found to be very useful over the course of my life. So I came to college, I got married, I lived in multiple places, and then I came back to California when my son was 4, just turned 4. I was 21. So 21 with a 4-year-old. I had no college, I had no high school diploma. I did not go to high school. I did not go. I just simply didn't go. And literally, I just didn't go. I just didn't go. And nobody seemed to have a problem with that, really. It was just, well, I guess Sharon's not going to high school. Okay. The high school was like that. My parents, everybody's like, well, I guess she's just not going. What are we going to do? We can't force her to go to school. I mean, they could not physically pick me up. I was 6 feet tall at that time, and they can't just physically pick you up and force you. So I just didn't go. So I was 21 years old with a 4-year-old, no job experience, and no education. Just be with that for a minute. The only job I could find to do was waiting tables, which was money. I was grateful for it. I was very grateful for my first waitress job and the multiple waitress jobs I had after that. But I knew that this was not the way. That what I wanted for my son was more than living in grinding poverty. There had to be a different way. Did I know that way? No. But I decided, literally out of the blue, because you can imagine, nobody in my family went to college. College was not a plan for us. I decided that I would start going to the community college in San Bernardino, because I was living in San Bernardino at the time, and see what happened. Why I thought that, I don't know. I look back on that decision. I don't know why I decided that. I don't know where I got the idea that people like me could go to college, because people like me did not go to college. People where I came from didn't do that. That just simply did not happen. It wasn't even well, we thought you might go to college, but you're not. There was no conversation about college, period, none. I don't know where I got the idea that I could go to college, like I was capable of it. I don't know where I got I don't know where this idea came from, but I decided if I went to college, that would make things different. That was a moment of blind faith on my part. Some of you come from a background very similar to mine. You may not have gotten married at 16. You may not have been sex, drugs, and rock and roll when you were a child, but some of you come from backgrounds like this, where you decided you wanted to go to college, or somebody at your high school said you should go to college, and you went, but people where I come from don't do that. And they said, but you can. And you let that bounce around in your head for a while, like a pachinko machine. You guys know what a pachinko machine is? Like a pinball machine, same concept. Yeah. And you went, well, hell, I might as well try it, right? Let's see what happens. And so you did. Doing that, going to college, is a significant and profound life change. You are being exposed to people you would never have been exposed to otherwise. You're being exposed to ideas that never even occurred to you to think. I know I did bio for non-bio majors, and I got through it. I don't know why I had to take it. The university said I had to take it. I said, great, I'd take it. I think I remember 4 ideas from that whole class, 3 of which were hysterically funny. But being exposed to ideas you've never been exposed to before, even when they're ideas you don't care much about, changes you. And some of you may have noticed that when you go home to visit your parents, that things are different. You go home to visit your family and things are different. And I remember that feeling. My mother only got to 9th grade. And then she was a farm girl in the Midwest. And at 16, pig farmers, this swear to God, it's a true story, pig farmers started showing up at her house, her parents' house. And everybody was encouraging her to sit outside and chat with the pig farmers and beaming at her. And it occurred to her that they were going to try and marry her off, and she didn't want to be a pig farmer's wife. She wanted to be more than that. She didn't know what, but she knew for sure she didn't want to be a pig farmer's wife. She had a sister, turns out to be my favorite aunt, in San Diego, an older sister who had moved to San Diego, and she got on a bus and went to San Diego in 1950 to make a life for herself. And I think that story probably explains a lot of my story. I really do. But the point here is my mother never got any more formal education. But my mother read all the time. And when I was growing up, there was nothing that you could ask. This is well before the days of the internet, right? But if you wanted to know something, like one time my brother and I, my older brother and I were outside and we found a lizard, a really cool looking lizard. And we brought it in to scare my mom. I was maybe like 5 or 6, and that would make my brother like 10. And we thought, oh, this is going to be great, right? Like, we're going to take him and go, Mom, we found something. And she'd go, really? What did you find? And we'd go, this. And she'd scream, and it would be awesome. And we like had it all figured out exactly how it was going to work. And it was super awesome. And the lizard was completely cool. And so we went in the house and we went, Mom. And she said, what? And we went, it's a lizard. And she went, oh, that's beautiful. Let's go look him up in the amphibians book. That was my mother. She always had an answer for everything. She knew everything, or knew at least where to go look it up. So then I started going to community college, graduated community college, came to UC Riverside. They had family student housing at the time. It was the old family student housing. It doesn't exist anymore. They took it down the last couple of years, but it was fantastic. So I lived in family student housing with my son. And my mom was still living in San Bernardino, and I would go visit my mother. And I would feel, and I think my little brother and little sister were living with her still. There's 9 years between. I'm child number 2 of 4. So my brother, me, my little brother, and then my sister. 9 years, no. Yeah, 9 years from top to bottom. So 4.5 between me and my older brother, 3 between me and my little brother, and then 4.5 years between me and my little sister. And I started feeling weird. You know, like my mom would go, so how's school going? And I'd start to tell her about whatever interesting thing I'd learned about. And it looked like she'd not necessarily zone out, but it was like that connection that I could lean into with my mom felt funny. You know, do you know that feeling with somebody that you're close to and you're talking to them but it doesn't feel like you're connecting, like you're not in the groove? Right? I felt like that. And I started getting really uncomfortable. And then some of the people that I knew from the old neighborhood, I'd hang out with them and they'd be talking about things that I didn't know anything about. And I would try and talk to them about things that I cared about because I was learning about all of these exciting things. And they didn't seem to find them very interesting. And I found myself getting increasingly uncomfortable around the people that were the people I came from. And I'm going to tell you something, and I'm telling you this because nobody told me this when I was going through it. And I was beginning to get the feeling that I might be acting like I was bigger than like I thought I was bigger than I should be, or I was better than you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, Miss Fancy Pants, she's going to college. Nobody said that, but I started to wonder if that wasn't what was going on, you know? Well, it turns out this feeling is a very, very common feeling, especially amongst first-generation college students. Because we are having experiences that the people of our origin have never had, they can't imagine having, that they don't know. They know normal stuff. And I don't mean normal like we're doing something wrong. I mean normal like normal for your family of origin. They know that stuff. But I do want to assure you, when you go home or when you talk to your mother especially, but your father, if you're very close to your father, when you talk to your parents about what's going on with you, and it seems like they're zoning out, it's probably not because they're bored or they're uninterested. It's because you're telling them about experiences that they don't have the hangers in their closet, if you will, to hang them on. But I will tell you as a mom that your parents are probably, I don't know your parents, but I can tell you about parents in general. Your parents are probably thrilled that you're having these experiences and are so proud of you, they cannot stand it. I did not know that about my mother until after she had died, and I was hanging out with her younger sister. And we were just, she'd made cookies. We're eating cookies that my Aunt Nan had made. So we're eating cookies and we're just chatting. And out of the blue, my Aunt Nan said, "Do you know how proud your mother was of you?" And I said, "I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what?" She said, "Yeah, every time I talk to your mother," and they would talk about every 2 weeks. She said, "Every time I talk to your mother, she would tell me what you were doing and how proud she was of you that you were doing it." And I, being a professional adult person, did what all professional adult people do in that moment. I burst into tears because I had no idea my mother had forgotten to tell me. It wasn't like her to do that, to tell you she was proud of you. It was like her to tell other people and forget to tell you. And you kept trying to do stuff, trying to get her to be proud of you. And she kept telling everybody else. And you may have parents that you can relate to this on this one. I also want to assure you that by the time that you are about 28 or 29, you're going to be back in the groove. It comes back. You're going through a time of rapid change right now. And I don't mean necessarily physical rapid change, although some of that's happening, you may have noticed. But they act like teenage years end like, well, you're 18 now, all the teenage changes are done. No, we know better. But by the time you're about 28, which I know for some of you are like, oh, flying shit, that's like 5 or 6 more years. But it's not that long, really. Think how quickly the last few years have gone by. The groove will come back and you will fit back in, especially if you have siblings coming up behind you who are also going to college, because that's going to normalize the experience. And if you have siblings who came ahead of you who went through college, talk to them. And because if you're not feeling this way, you're first generation college student, but you're not feeling this way with your folks, that's because your older siblings broke that ground for you. And your parents have like, oh yeah, this is normal college experience stuff they're telling me about. I know that now, and I shall put on my I'm fascinated face and listen to every word you're saying while you take out the trash, and don't forget to put your dishes in the sink, your mother will say. Okay? So I had that feeling, and I wish somebody had told me that this was normal. But being a first generation student, I had nobody to lean on. And when I came to UC, when I was at the community college, it was not nearly as bad, because the community college, if you went, is full of people of all ages doing all kinds of stuff. So the fact that you don't know what you're doing isn't that weird, because there's a lot of people who don't know what they're doing. But when I came to UC Riverside to do my undergraduate work, I felt like everybody had this college stuff figured out except me. I was the only one who didn't understand how college worked. And now they have for you all programs to help you understand how college works. I I used to be so envious of people who came from a tradition of college, because they could just go home and tell their parents, well, this is going on and I don't know what to do, and their parents could coach them through it. I had nothing. I had like an 8-year-old that I could go home to, and a cat and some fish. None of them had been to college either. So there was no one I could go to and ask for advice. And I hated to tell my advisors I had no idea what I was doing, because I was pretty sure if they found out I had no idea what I was doing, they'd go, "Oh, you slipped in. Oh, we didn't know. Oh, no, college is only for people who deserve to be here. And if you don't know what you're doing, you clearly don't deserve to be here. And so we'd like you to leave." And then I'd be stuck waiting tables for the rest of my life, or living out of a car or something like that. I'm pretty good at horribilizing, by the way, especially when I was poor and starving to death and holding on with my fingernails, trying to get this college education, hoping it would make a difference, because I had this idea that it might. I marvel. I have no idea what that young woman thought and how she came up with this idea, but She kept going to school thinking it's going to make a difference. If I just keep doing this, it's going to make a difference. And by the way, it did. All right. So where am I on time? Oh, 5:39. I'm great amount. I'm really good on the time. All right. So see, when you're being that self-disclosive to essentially a room full of strangers, it feels like time is just like racing by. Time gets all timey-wimey for those of us Doctor Who fans in the room. All right. So yes, I'm a Doctor Who fan. Thank you very much. All right. So I've covered a little bit about the operating system your folks have installed and how you're, if you will, installing apps now and changing the operating system. Some of you also, by the way, may really be struggling with your family because the changes you're making to your operating system, they're less than excited about. I know. Yeah. All I can tell you is if they're paying for your college, shut up. Don't tell them about the changes that you're making because they're paying for your college. Go for it, like accept that. Yes, it's hard. No, you won't die. And make sure that you have a good social network outside of your parents who accept you for who you are. I get it, but seriously, if they're paying for your college, just shut up. I graduated with $40,000 in student loan debt, which was not that much at the time. And I just paid it off 2 years ago. I know the student loan debts that some of you are going to be graduating with, and I'm deeply sorry. And this is a terribly broken system, and we've got to fix it. Graduate, get out here, and let's start fixing it. But all of that notwithstanding, that's why I'm saying if your parents aren't really accepting of the changes that you're making to your operating system, but they're paying for your college, just shut up and let them pay for your college. Get out of college without the huge debt if you can possibly do it. All right, so you are discovering who you are. That's your job in college. It's one of your jobs in college. You are discovering who you are. And who you are is a mix of the operating system your parents installed and the experiences that you're having. By the way, this process is very intense right now because you're in college, but this process is the rest of your life. You're in an intense period of change. The rest of your life will not usually be as intense, but right now is an intense period of change. And that's part of why I don't want a tattoo, because things change. Don't get tattoos right now either, really, because 3 years from now, you're going to be like, why was I drunk? What happened that I thought this tattoo was a good idea? Don't wait a bit longer. I can't even get a personalized license plate because my likes changes, interests, all of that it all changes enough that I'm not willing to look at the same license plate for like 7 to 10 years. Yeah, I drive my cars 7 to 10 years. So you are going through a significant period of change. And here's an insight for you that you may not have gotten yet. You get to say who you are. You get to decide who you are. Your parents don't get to decide who you are. You get to decide what's right for you. You get to decide what you like and don't like. You get to decide all kinds of things about yourself. You get to make those decisions. The bad news is you get to make those decisions, and those decisions can be very difficult. It can be, and in college, you're at times trying some stuff on. You're trying on a way to be to see how it fits, if you will. And then, like a sweater that isn't quite right, you may take some of that stuff off and put it aside. But the part of the process is the trying on to decide if it works for you or if it doesn't. And that's literally a good thing. So if your parents or your friends roll their eyes at you and go, oh, you're going through a phase, don't diminish that. These phases are good things. These are how you discover who you want to be and how you want to be in the world. You get to make those decisions for yourself. Earlier, I said for the people whose parents installed their operating system and they went, that's it, I want no changes now. This is exactly and only the operating system I want. They get to make that decision too, just like you get to make the decision for who you're going to be. They get to decide that. Again, we can think it's short-sighted, we can think it's limiting, we can think it's dumb, we can think whatever thoughts we wish to think about that, but we don't have the right to tell them they're wrong or stupid or bad, just like they don't have the right to tell you you're wrong or stupid or bad. The only people who can make the decisions about what's right for you and how you're going to be as a person is you. That's it. Now, I make that sound like, oh, well, you just sit down, around on campus one day and you just think it through and decide who you're going to be. And then you're done and you're good to go, right? No, it's much harder than that. For me, my 20s were spent, a lot of my 20s were spent sitting in darkened rooms at 2 in the morning, drinking my adult beverage of choice and thinking. There was a lot of that. And if you had walked into the room at any moment in that thinking and said, what are you thinking about? I wouldn't have been able to tell you because it wasn't thinking always with words. A lot of it was thinking with emotions and processing emotions and then thinking about those. There was also some professional therapy in there, which, by the way, I recommend to everybody. I think professional therapists are like dental hygienists. Like you should just go every now and again to just like get a checkup. Here's what's going on in my head. Am I okay? Am I good? Like whatever. So a little bit of therapy as well in my 20s. I might have had a little bit to work through. I'm suggesting, given what I've told you about me, you could see how there might have been some things that I needed to work through as leftovers for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, maybe. So this process is not going to be a one and done. So if you feel like sometimes, gosh, I'm really struggling with who I want to be, and it doesn't feel like things are fitting particularly well, but I don't know who I want to be, and then other times you're like, no, I've got this. I think I've nailed this. Yes, yes, I think I have. That's called normal. That process is normal. That's something also I wish someone had told me. That would have been very helpful to have someone tell me that. No one told me that. I thought I was the only person in the world who sat up at 2 in the morning drinking red wine going, I have no idea. I don't know anything. I don't know. And I'm raising a kid. I'm supposed to know stuff. I don't even have a reptile book to look up lizards in. Like, I don't know anything. My son says, now in his mid-40s, that I didn't do as badly as I think I did, but raising kids is a whole nother banana. All right, so here's something else I want to tell you. Regardless of where you come from, regardless of how good or bad where you come from was or is, your origin story is an incredibly important story. It is the story of where you came from and how you got to be here. And that story is super important. Like your origin story is massively important. It helps you figure out who you are and why you are the way you are and what things you want to keep and throw away. Your origin story is an incredibly important story. One of the downsides to being a first generation college student is in getting to know other students, all of whom you swear come from like 17 generations of college, is that your story is weird and they won't understand it. And you listen to their stories and you go, oh yeah, no, I can't talk about my story. Oh no, no. If I talk about my origin story, they're going to all look at me like with giant eyes at best, or scream and run from the room at worst. Which is possible. Absolutely. This is part of why I'm nervous telling you about my origin story, because you all could, and here I am at my age, still a little concerned. Some of you would go, oh my God, and run out of the room. I was visiting with my sister, oh gosh, recently. I don't remember when, but recently I was visiting with my sister. She lives up in the Redding area in Northern California. And her story of growing up makes even less sense than my story of growing up. She got off track for quite some time. She didn't pull herself together until she was 29. She had her daughter, who is now just turned 30. She had her daughter at about 28, 29. And And I was furious with her when she got pregnant and decided to keep the baby. I was furious with her. My mom told me she was so happy. And I was so angry. I was so angry because my sister was doing everything she could to make sure she was dead by the time she was 30. And I knew that if she had that baby, that when she finally got herself killed, for whatever value of killed that was, I was going to be the one raising that child. And my kid was 15. And I did not want to start raising another child from the ground up. But what else was I going to do? I figured my mom was going to call me, tell me Lisa overdosed, or the guy that she was with beat her to death, or something. And somebody's got to take this baby. I was so angry with her. So my sister also has an interesting origin story. She got her master's degree in the last couple of years. She's working as a social worker up in the Reading area. And there's this big thing, parenthetical now, there's this big thing in the business, in the tech industry, but in a lot of industries right now, where they want you to bring your authentic self to work. Bring your whole self to work, they say. And what they're trying to do is, regardless of, like, for example, how you express your gender or your individuality, they want you to bring that to work. Don't feel like there's something wrong with you if you're, for example, transgender or whatever. Come to work exactly as the person that you are. They want that. And I get that, right? Like that's, and the blue hair. Everybody's like, oh, well, she may be older, but she's got blue hair. She's probably cool. She's got blue hair, or at least is blue right now. And it's true, that's fine. But every now and then I will forget and I will say something in like a meeting, a social meeting, not in a meeting, but like a social, because companies like to, especially when you're working remotely, they like to have social hour where everybody gets together on their Zoom and they chat or they play games or whatever. And voice talking and chatting. And every now and then somebody will make a comment in a chat and I will make a comment back that exposes my origin story, if you will, or at least comes from my origin story. And then usually later I'm spoken to by somebody going, you really shouldn't make those sorts of comments, Sharon. Maybe not that. And my sister and I were talking about that. And she's like, she started laughing. She goes, because she works a lot with women on the streets, especially women who are homeless, and works a lot with families, reunification, foster kids, all of that. And so they'll be in a meeting with all of the social workers, and one of the social workers will say something about some woman and why is she doing what she does, and my sister, without thinking, will go, well, when I was in that situation, I insert horrible thing here, right? Because my sister makes no bones about who she is and where she's from, and I admire her greatly for that. But she says when she does that, everybody in the room goes and stares at her. And she goes, yeah, maybe not sharing quite that much about myself would be fine. So yeah. And we were laughing, bring your whole self, be your authentic self at work. And my sister and I are like, not all of it. For us, not all of it. We've had an interesting life, not all of our lives. Your origin story is not something to be embarrassed about. Your origin story matters. And your origin story is not a life sentence. And I don't know who needs to hear that again, but I'm going to say it again. Your origin story is not a life sentence. If I had decided to accept the ideas that people had about who I was and what I was capable of at 16 years old, I would never have been in this room. I might be here as a janitor. I would never be here in front of the room. And all of the things that I have done in my life, and they are extraordinary. It has been an amazing ride thus far. I'm not saying it's all been, puppies and kittens and rainbows. Believe me, it has not. But I couldn't have gotten here if I had accepted the idea that my origin story is a life sentence. You can be far more than you think you can. Like your wildest dream, think of like your wildest dream for yourself and then double that. That's what you are capable of being. How do I know that? Because you're here. That literally because you're here. I believe 100% with all of my heart, soul, and being, and the research shows. So I love it when what I believe lines up with what the research shows, The research shows that if you can get an education, everything is different, and it is different generationally. So I came from poverty. My folks didn't have a lot of money. I had no money when my son was growing up, none, zero. We were starving to death. I got a college education. My son has a college education now, and his children will have a college education. We lifted ourselves out of poverty. Now, if you come from poverty, that's a big fucking deal. If you don't come from poverty, you have no idea what a big deal that I just said. But if you come from poverty, that's a big fucking deal. So I know there are days where you're like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I cannot do this. I can't take one more midterm. I can't go to one more class. I can't sit through one more stupid history class that I do not care about at all. I got it. I so get it. Like, I totally get it. Go anyway. Go anyway, especially if you're first generation and especially if you come from poverty, because you don't know where you're going to be in 40 years because you stuck here. But you know where you're going to be in 40 years if you don't stay here. And for those of us who are first generation who come from poverty, for us, this choice is really clear. And by the way, if you've been sitting there going, well, it's lovely that Sharon's talking about being, coming from poverty and coming from, a non-traditional background and all of that, but I really can't relate to anything she's saying. The rest of us know that. Oh, do we know that? We know you can't relate. We see it on your faces when you're talking about what you did over the weekend. We know you can't relate, and that's okay. But we're going to ask you to try and relate because we're all going to the same place. So, all right, you get to decide what matters to you. You get to decide what your values are. For example, here I go, being self-disclosive. In those nights where I sat in the dark and drank red wine, still one of my favorite beverages, I thought very hard about what mattered to me, because where I come from, when you are poor, what matters to you is not things, it's people. Why do people matter to you more than anything when you're poor? Because your social network saves you. When you have no food, your social network does. And you can reach out to somebody and say, hey, what you making for dinner tonight? And they will recognize that you may not have any food and they'll invite you over. And you do the same for them. And so on. So when you look at poor people and you think, well, why don't they leave? It's all poor there. Why don't they just simply move away? To where? With what social network? Their social network is literally keeping them alive. Their social network takes them to work when their car doesn't work. Their social network watches their kids while they are at work. It's the only way they can afford to work. And you watch their kids while they're at work. Nobody can afford childcare. Childcare is now almost the price of a mortgage. So when you're poor, how do you do that? Your social network is everything. But when I got to college, I found people who valued things over people, and I found that most mystifying. Like, why would you value things over people? They're just things. They're just stuff. Yes, I love my shawl. I'm going to show this off. I knit this with the beads and all of that. Again, love it. Keeps my neck warm. But would I give it away to somebody I knew who needed it? Absolutely, without a second thought. 100%. Because it's just a thing. I can get another shawl. I actually have many shawls. I probably have too many shawls, because I like to keep my shoulders and my neck warm in the winter. So, or when it's heavily air conditioned. But it's just stuff. And I don't understand valuing stuff over people. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong if you do. I'm saying these are my values. And I found it very difficult to exist in a system, the university system, surrounded by people who seem to value things over the people in their world. One of my personal values is it is an absolute crime against humanity to erase people, to make people not visible, to treat them like they're not valuable. And I mean people, like all of us. Like when you walk down the street and you see a homeless person, and to pretend that they don't exist, to me, that's like a crime against humanity, because they're a person just like you are. And there, but for the roll of the dice, that could be you. So at least greet them. Hi, how you doing? Cold night, isn't it? Just basic human courtesy. That's me and that's my values. I am not saying you are wrong if you don't do those values. All right. Now time is going fast. Hang on. Okay. So here's the problem, and this really is the problem. This is like the problem. If you're like, Sharon, everything you just said to me, I totally am on board with. I'm experiencing a lot of it now. I got it. Like, I really get what you're saying. Well, here's a problem. Once you've figured out who you are, or as you are figuring out who you are, because most of you are in the process of figuring this stuff out, we only know you from your actions. We have no access to the thoughts in your head. We have no access to the you that lives in this 3-4 pounds. I think that's human brains weigh about 3 pounds, right? Am I remembering that right? Anybody? How do you not know that? How do I be in a room of this much education and nobody knows? All right, let's say it's 3 pounds. There's 3 pounds of squish that's in our skull, right? That's who you are. But the rest of us have no access to that directly. We can't jack in, and like experience who you are. I'm watching a show right now. I'm kind of watching a show right now called Dr. Brain, where this guy is like wearing silly caps and puts on and gets access to memories. It's almost interesting. It's perfect for when I need to wind down and not think anymore, because it's almost interesting, but it's not interesting enough that I'm like, gotta see what happens next. It's like, oh yeah, I'm tired. I'm going to bed now. So we can't see inside of your brain to see who you are. The only way we have to know who you are is to watch your actions. And that's the bad news. And it's a real problem, because your actions are who we are going to figure out who you are. That's how we know. Now, I don't want any hands raised here, because inevitably somebody raises their, not inevitably, but the one time where I went, oh, without thinking, I said, oh, raise your hand if it wound up being really unpleasant. So some of you, many of you, I hope, have encountered a person that you would be romantically interested in, and you've done the dating thing. Oh, dating, date. By the way, dating's a nightmare, but you've done the dating thing, the hanging out thing, like all of that. And then at some point it's like, oh, we should be, romantic partners. And the other person went, oh, yes. And then hopefully at some point you sat down and defined what romantic partner was for you, for them, right? Kind of like, oh, I think romantic partners are people who see each other exclusively and don't see other people. And the other person went, I agree. I love monogamy. That's precisely what I am looking for. And you went, excellent. And you saw each other for a while. And then you discovered that their version of monogamy, their definition of monogamy, has a lot more people involved in it than your definition of monogamy. And that's like a knife to your heart. Oh, and that's why I said, don't raise your hand. The one time I didn't think, and I went, so raise your hand if that's ever happened to you. This one person raised their hand and looked like they were green. I guess it had been recent. And I was just like, oh, that's no good. I can't do that. Okay, don't raise your hand. So don't raise your hand. But this is that whole, so this person talked a good game, right? Like, you were really excited about them. Ooh, romantic partnership. That's working out super well. I'm really enjoying that. And they said, yes, I also wish to be in a monogamous romantic partnership with you. That sounds awesome too. And you went, outstanding. And then they did something that was not what they said they would do. They just didn't. And that's bad, right? So they may say they love monogamy. It's their favorite thing. Boy, that's all I want in the world is a monogamous relationship. It's just the two of us against the world. But their actions show you, no, not so much. Not so much. That's not, they may say that's who they are, but that's not who they are. Now, that's a wild and crazy example, right? And hopefully one that does not happen to you in your lifetime. Statistically, it may or may not. But the problem here is we watch you by your actions. So if, for example, you to say, Sharon, the values that matter to me is I be honest and true to my word and IB, these other things. And I go, outstanding, well done, good job. And then you cheat on the midterm. And I go, fuck, we have a problem. Because now I know you as a person who, under stress, will do dumb, stupid things and steal other people's work and represent it as your own. That is not a true to your word person. And why is this a problem, you're thinking? It's a problem because once you figure out who you are, you have to be that. And that's hard. For example, some years ago, when I was in college, I was in my junior year as an undergraduate. My father died. Not unexpected, but it was quick. He'd been sick for a while and then he just died. And I didn't really get along with my father. I've realized in the years since I'm very much like my father. Some of the good stuff. I'm not like my father for some of the bad stuff. But even if you don't like your parent, if they die, it's unsettling at least, right? And it was right around finals time. So I went to my professors and I said, God, you know what? My dad just died and I'm feeling really unsettled by this and I would like to take an incomplete. And 3 of my 4 professors said independently, they said, you know what? Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to take the final exam. If the quality of your final exam is below what you've been doing, I'm just going to tear it up and throw it away and give you an incomplete. And I went, God, that is super nice, right? That is super awesome. Thank you. Thank you. One professor said, yeah, sure, whatever. Take the incomplete. I'll see you in the fall. It was some spring quarter. And so that's what we did. So fast forward, now we're into mid fall quarter. I'm like, oh, I gotta take care of this incomplete because those things, they breed like bunny rabbits, under the cover of darkness. So I got to get this thing sorted out. And so I, talked to my professor. We set up a time for me to come in and take the final exam for that class. I said, outstanding. So I was studying and I was studying. And the night before I'm going to take the final for that class, I was studying and I was going crazy because it was World Prehistory Part 1, which is like 120,000 years of world prehistory. It's not a small amount of time. And I was like, God, I'm going nuts. I put my son to bed, fed him dinner, put him to bed. He's in bed asleep. And I'm like, there's a couple of ways he could test here. He could test for sweeping themes. He could test for dates. He could test for regional variations. And I'm losing my mind trying to figure out a way to approach this material. So I reached out to a friend of mine who was an RA over at the dorm right over there. Anyway, very close to the house. She used to watch my kid for me sometimes. Actually, the whole dorm would watch my kid for me sometimes, it turned out. So I called her and I said, Debbie, do you still have the final that Dr. Taylor gave for world prehistory? And she went, yeah, I think I do. I said, God, could you run it over? Because I'm pulling my hair out trying to come up with a strategy to study for this thing, and I got to take it tomorrow, and I'm struggling. She said, yeah, no problem. So she ran it over, and I said, oh, Debbie, yeah, go, okay, excellent, thank you so much. I'm going to go study. She said, yep, I got stuff to do. I said, okay, bye. Off she goes. So I looked at it and I went, okay, I see how he tested. Okay, I've got a strategy now for studying. Excellent, wonderful, beautiful. Next morning, get up, get the kid off to school, and I head over to main campus, to take the exam. And I don't know if you know where family student housing used to be, but it's all the new buildings over there. So I was walking through family student housing and walking along thinking about this final. And I'm like, okay, well, this is great. And I get to, the Circle Road and I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. And I go to step up onto the main part of campus. I step up on the curb and I suddenly think, what if Dr. Taylor gives me the same final exam? I went, oh, fuck. That's so bad. So now I'm walking over towards the bell tower and I'm like, well, what do I do if he gives me the same final exam? I mean, I've seen it. I used it not as a study guide, but as a study method. Oh, I see the themes he's going for when he writes a final exam. Oh God, what if if he gives it to me, if he gives me the same final, I can't take it. I can't take the final. I've seen it. It's not a fair test. Now, I want to pause right here just in the room, because I'm not in a position to see it for those of you online, just in the room, how many of you think I'm an absolute idiot for saying I can't take that final? You are not going to hurt my feelings if you put your hands up. Yeah, it's usually about 30% of the people in the room go, "You're an idiot, Sharon." And I go, So I was like, I can't take this final because I've seen it. That gives me an unfair advantage. And the grade won't be a real assessment of my abilities. And so I'm gonna have to tell him I can't take it. And that's gonna mean that he gives me an F for the class. And now I'm walking over to Watkins Hall slowly, very slowly. That means I'm gonna get an F for the class, which means I will have failed, which means that the university is going to kick me out, which means Matthew and I will have no place to live, and we're probably going to wind up living under a bridge. And by the time he's 18, he's going to have done hard time for selling drugs, and I'm going to wind up a prostitute. That's about the time I got to the Watkins Hall door. Okay, see, I'm horribilizing, right? Yeah, yeah. So now by the time I get to Dr. Taylor's office, I'm like shaking because literally my entire life rides on whether or not he gives me a different final exam. And I said, "Oh, Dr. Taylor." He says, "Oh, welcome, Sharon, here. Here's a desk. Okay, you sit down." I got out my blue book because back in the day we did blue books. He says, "Okay, well, and here you go. Here's your final exam." And he puts it down on the table. I said, "Oh, thank you, Dr. Taylor, very much." And I look at it. Oh my God, it's a brand new exam. I've never seen this before. Now, why would I have had to tell Dr. Taylor that I've seen this exam and I can't take it, thus winding up a homeless prostitute living under a bridge with a son who's doing hard time for selling drugs? Because one of my values is I will succeed or fail based on my own efforts. No, it's not a level playing field, but my skills and gifts are significant, as are yours. My skills and gifts are significant, and I will succeed or fail based on my abilities as my abilities, not because I got a special edge, not because I took shortcuts, not because. Because when I succeed at something, I want to know I succeeded because of my own efforts, because of who I am and my gifts and my hard work. And that meant sometimes getting a B out of a class was amazing. Because you've all had that class where you struggled and fought and struggled and you got a B for it, and you were like doing the happy dog dance, like, "Woo, I got a B. Woohoo," right? And your friends are like, "No, but it's a B." You're like, "I know, I passed with a B. Woohoo." I want that. I want my successes to be something that I own because I did it. I am not saying you're wrong if you don't. I'm saying that's mine. This is where I have to be an example. I'm saying that's part of my values and what I think is important. 612. Okay, so when you get out into the world, we don't know who you are. We watch who you are. You tell us who you are by showing us who you are. When you take shortcuts as an engineer that are careless, that are stealing other people's work, when you take credit for other people's work, we see you. We see you. And we know who you are. And if you think that who you are when you're engineering is a different person than who you are when you're not engineering, you're wrong. Who you are is who you are. Whether you're engineering or you're parenting or you're dating or you're studenting or you're dancing or whatever it is you're, grocery shopping, I don't know, insert activity here. That's all who you are. That's you. With all of the things that you've decided matter to you, all of the things that you have decided are valuable to you, that's you. So when you approach your engineering thinking, well, this is just the engineering part, that's not who I am really. No, that's who you are really. And the hard part for you and for us humans is aligning who we say we are with who we behave as who we are. And if I say I'm going to be successful or fail based on my own abilities, my own talents, my own gifts, and my own hard work, I couldn't have taken Dr. Taylor's exam if I'd seen it, because that meant I had an unfair advantage. And that meant that if I got an A in that class, I didn't earn that A. And there would forever be on my transcript something that I got assigned that I didn't earn. And that's not okay with me. Again, I am not saying that you were wrong. If you think I'm an idiot for that one, I'm saying those are my values and tragically how my values have to play out. And that's where the ethics stuff comes in. Once you decide who you are, you're going to be faced with situations where you're being asked to do things that aren't your values. For example, I am not comfortable working in an industry where we can kill people. I'm not comfortable with that. Where if we screw it up, people are going to die. Medical is right out for me. Medical equipment, right out for me. Because if we screw that up, people are going to die. And I'm being who I am. I can't be part of that. I am thrilled that there are people who can be, because we need that technology. I would not, I don't know how I would manage myself if a project I worked on wound up killing somebody because we screwed it up badly enough that we killed somebody. I also have huge problems with the war machine industry, huge problems with the war machine industry, philosophical problems and ethical problems. Am I glad they exist? I don't know. But I know I can't work for them. I can't help build things that blow people up. Like that's the point of the thing. Which is a bummer because there's that site over in Norco. And apparently they go and they blow things up all the time to test stuff. And that would be super fun to be part of. But they're building weapons and I can't participate in that. And again, I'm probably glad that there are people who can do that. I'm saying for me, that's not the right choice. That's not right for me. That's right for other people. And good on them, I guess, because it looks like we're going to build these things one way or the other. But my values are such that I can't be part of that because I am a kind person. I am mostly a gentle person. And if I'm going to be a kind and gentle person, I can't work in the war machine industry. Those things are inconsistent. Would I do it if it was the last job ever and I was starving? Yeah, okay, I'd probably do it. But I do it knowing that what I was doing. I wouldn't make myself be right with it. I would be like, it's this or starve. Well, I've starved before and it's not that fun, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. Because starving is really overrated. Not doing that. All right. 6:17, I have 3 minutes. Let me go see what my slides are. Hello, slides. Aha. Oh, yeah, see, I should have shown that about 5 minutes ago. Your engineering is not separate from you. You are not a different person when you are engineering than you are doing the rest of your life. You have the same ethics, the same integrity, the same everything throughout your entire life, or at least you should. Sociopaths don't. Sociopaths are the person they need to be at that moment to get what they want out of every social situation. By the way, about 10% of the world seems to have sociopathic traits, and that little statistic will just bounce around in your head. So 1 out of 10 people I meet has sociopathic traits. That's fantastic. Great. Yeah, now I've got that in your head now. I just read this like the other day. I just read that statistic, and it's been bouncing around in my head. Now I'm sharing it with you to see if it'll bounce in your head and stop bouncing in mine, because I'm tired of it bouncing in mine. So this is a very different ethics lecture than you've ever had before. I have no resounding, and thus we can see or go forth and do. What I want you to do is have things to think about and things to maybe consider, and maybe to understand that you are not the only one who has been having some experiences, some kinds of thoughts, some discomforts, etc. Had I had this lecture when I was 22, man, would that have helped. I still would have spent time sitting in dark rooms with red wine because it seems to just be what I do. But it really would have helped to have had somebody tell me this is normal. But we didn't even recognize first-generation college students existed when I was born, much less that we had unique challenges, etc. All right, so that's it. I'm going to cut you all loose. Have a great weekend. Stay dry. It's supposed to rain all weekend. Turn your stuff in. Thank you very much. And let me see if I have any. Nope, no questions. Excellent. Stop recording.